chat.
Wonderful.
All right.
How you been? All right?
Been all right. Yeah. Can't complain, you know?
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, should we crack straight on?
Yeah, I'm ready when you are.
Wonderful. So we are recording, sitting opposite me today via the means of Zoom, Laura Jane Grace. Hello.
Hello.
So where are you today, Laura?
I'm at home in Chicago, Illinois.
As Chicago, what's going on lockdown-wise out there?
You know, the sun is shining, so that's a nice thing.
Absolutely.
I live next door to a pretty amazing park. I plan on taking a walk through the park. So far, all summer long, the park has been there and it's been green and it's been lovely. So that's on the plus side. In general, I've kind of just tried to stick to my neighborhood this summer. You know, like things feel tense anytime I go out in really, really big public places, you know,
Yeah.
like a run to the store or whatever. People seem very on edge. And I don't know. I think everyone's just trying to survive, you know, but it's been like the most low key summer I've had in my entire adult life, as far as like, you know, limited human interactions. I do month on, month off parenting with my daughter, and you know, other than being with my daughter every other month, I haven't been in another human being's contact since March.
Oh, really?
Oh.
So how have you found it creatively?
You know, there's a lot of things about it to me that have been really motivating and have really centered me in odd ways. I think like for a while I felt apprehensive to talk about that, but then I saw other people talking about it too and how they found it similar. But you know, obviously, like I made a record during this time. I made a zine. I finished my zine. I like sold copies on my Etsy page last week. So I've like creatively stayed really motivated, but in general, I think like, you know, that's not to say that self-motivation is always the easiest.
Sure.
But I really like push myself to stay motivated of like, okay, you need to wake up in the morning and you need to do something, you know, like you need to go running, you need to maybe do yoga, you need to like get yourself out of bed, you need to make your bed every day, you know, like you can't fall into this, like, because you'll never get out of it otherwise, and just keep.
So true.
You know?
So true. Like, you know, being honest, like the last 2 days have been the first 2 days that I've ever just thought, wow, this is strange times we're living in. And it started to kind of hit a little bit yesterday. And then this morning I was like, I can't be bothered to go for a run. And I was like, man, you got to go for a fucking run. Go for a run. Just do it. And I got back from the run, and just something as simple as that does make a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And like, you know, adding rituals to that too of like I have a calendar and like, you know, I'll mark every day that I do go for a run and then like color it in green so that I have a visual to look along with it, you know, and then setting goals of like, you know, when I set the recording session for the album, I you know, purposely like booked it a little further in advance where I was like, okay, I've got a month until I'm going to go into the studio now. So then every day I'm going to go running first thing. And then I'm going to practice the songs. I'm going to run through all the songs twice. And then, you know, whatever other chores or stuff that I set for myself to do today, just making sure I met those things. And then having like an incremental goal to look forward to. Sure. And then similar with like, okay, album release is coming up. I've got that to look forward to. That's what I'm working towards right now. Because if it wasn't for those kind of anchor points, I just would be drifting out here in the abyss, you know?
Yeah. Well, should we talk about some records? That's always a nice thing to do.
Happy to.
Wonderful. Laura, what's the song with the greatest ever intro?
Banned from the Roxy by Crass. Name of the drum beat. Come on.
That's such a good shot. When I saw your answers earlier, I was like, man, why has no one picked that tune?
It's such a like, you know, Penny, who played drums for Crass, is such a unique drummer in that people really discredit him in that he might not be on paper like the most technical drummer, you know, like he's a punk drummer, but it's people can't reproduce it. I've never heard a drummer play that drum beat the same way that he plays it, in the same way that he records it. And I mean, the snarl of Steve Ignorant's vocals when they come in It's
Yeah.
pure venom. And I can't think of another drum beat preceding a vocal that like encapsulates that venom. Like you
Yeah.
feel everything from that song in that drum beat, and it's just a simple drum beat, and you know exactly what it's
Yeah.
like. You just feel the energy. It just completely translates.
It's such a call of arms, isn't it? Right from the off, it's like, right, strap yourselves in. We've got something to say here. It's such a good choice, that is. Like I said, stunned no one's ever picked that. Was there any other kind of honourable mentions that you considered before you settled on that?
That was the first thing that popped into my head, and then like I was like, that's too easy. I can't just go with that. And
Yeah.
then I was pushing myself to come up with other stuff, and everything else I was thinking of were maybe like more guitar driven, like, and kind of seemed in cliche. Like for a second, my brain drifted to like, well, what about like Back in Black or something like that? Yeah. But really, like, they all just pale in comparison to Band from Roxy,
Yeah. Amazing choice. Okay, Laura, track 2. The first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you?
It was Somewhere Over the Rainbow, as sung by Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz. And, that was a movie that really early on I watched repeatedly. Like I had a VHS copy that was almost like a babysitter in ways, where whenever my mom needed a nap or something in the other room, like she would put it on and I would sit there and I'd watch The Wizard of Oz. And so when thinking about the question, like I guess I'd never had that question before, and I'd never really thought back, and every time I thought I hit on something, like for a second I was like, was it 18 in Life, Skid Row? Was it there was a Bon Jovi song on New Jersey that I remember affected me in the 3rd grade, but I just was like, well, think a little bit further back than that. And it had to have been Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I mean, it's a very emotional song in general, right?
And completely, it's a beautiful record. What was the emotion that you got from that, Laura?
Longing for home.
Yeah.
And it was like a strange feeling to feel transmitted. I grew up in a military family, so I was constantly moving around. So, from a very young age, constantly living with a feeling of like, oh, I really miss this place that I used to live, and having left a group of friends behind. So there was always that like feeling of missing that place where I used to belong, and wishing that I could somehow get back there.
Was that tough, constantly moving around? Well, I take it you're talking about living on military bases.
Yeah.
So that kind of upheaval, that can be pretty trying for a kid, right?
Yeah, I think namely just the making a new friend group, was something that was really difficult, and gets difficult as you get older, and especially as when you reach adolescence and stuff like that. But it was tough at times, but in retrospect, I'm really, really grateful for the experience, and for having, like, from a young age, to have gotten to see so many places and to experience so much variety in culture, and like, just living in different places, seeing the world in different ways from a young age. It naturally just expanded my worldview and made me realize that there were places beyond where I was,
Yeah. And that point's where you have to go and sort of make friends. That isn't easy. And like you say, the older you get, the tougher that is, when adolescence bites and things like that. Was you a confident kid?
I, consistently lost confidence.
Yeah.
And I, like, there were certain things that, from a young age, like, I struggled with, that diminished my confidence, whether that was like, first day of kindergarten, the elementary school I went to, the kindergartners had to enter through a different door than the rest of the kids. And so you lined up in front of this door. And on that very first day, the teachers didn't believe I was a kindergartner because I was so tall. They thought I was like lying. So I remember like multiple incidents of being met with distrust as a kid that really like shattered me in ways because I wasn't being dishonest. You know, or another example of that would be like, it's so stupid, but like, you know, when you're a kid and you have to ask the teacher to use the bathroom. And like, it never would have occurred to me as a child on my own of like, oh, I should lie and say I need to use the bathroom when I don't really need to. I would have only ever asked to use the restroom if I needed to use the restroom. And then teachers immediately meeting you with suspicion for that, of like, oh, you're just trying to leave the classroom. You know, you're trying to do something sneaky in the bathroom. So things like that, I think, like kind of broke down my confidence and confused me as a kid. Because I think that, you know, I was a kind kid. I was a nice kid, you know. Yeah.
But I think, you know, I don't know how it is for you, but I think, you know, things like that, you know, asking teachers if you can use the bathroom and things like that. At the time, you just you do it because that's what you're told to do. And as you get older, in hindsight, you just think, what was I thinking? Like, you know, and it's not until you get, you know, for me, like a lot older, you question authority. But at the time, you know, I guess it's just what you do. And I just wish, and I say to my kids sometimes, like, you don't have to do that. Like, and they're like, what? No, you don't. No, you don't. And it's like, oh, I think we do. It's like, no, you can just say, no, I don't want to do that. It's fine. You know, they're not in charge.
Good for you though, because that's, you know, and that's something I do with my daughter as well. But that was something no one ever told me then, you know, and I wish that they would have, because that would have given me that confidence. And I said that exact thing to my daughter, where I was like, listen, if you have to go to the bathroom at school and the teacher tells you that you can't go, you fucking go, you know. I will not be upset with you, and I will stand up for you, and I will have your back. And that's the simplest thing to say to a kid. And it's something no one ever said to me as a kid, of like, I have your back and I trust you, and that the teacher isn't always going to be right, you know? So that confusion of like inherently trusting authority figures and then having that trust broken repeatedly as a kid was something that, you know, shatters your little world.
Yeah. And then you start listening to Crass. Fuck.
Or Crass sooner, though, is the thing. I unfortunately, there was like a couple stepping stones, to quote a popularly covered punk song that I heard early on. But a couple stepping stones in between that, if Crass would have gotten there earlier, I think would have helped me in my development.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about them formative years. For track 3, Laura, the song that reminds you of your time at school. Okay,
this is embarrassing. I chose the Ramones, I Want to Be Sedated. And I'll explain that in that when I was like, you know, 13 years old and first getting into punk, I was like one of the first kids to really get into punk at my school. And I like very much was into the fashion of it, like spiking my hair out like Sid Vicious and like safety pins and bondage belts and stuff like that. And at the time, I went by the name Tom Gable, and people would sing at me. They would go, ba, 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 ba. I want to be Tom Gable.
So, of course they did.
I would walk down the halls of high school, and that's when people would sing at me. So that song will forever remind me of that. And, you know, I'm okay with that. That's part of my past.
So how was school, Laura?
Oh, it was hell. I mean, I dropped out when I was 16. It wasn't because of that, though. But yeah, I did, you know. I mean, there was good memories, but the good memories are mostly like friend associated. And, you know, honestly, a lot of those people that are the good memories from school, like I keep in touch with, and I'm
sure.
still with, you know. You know, I do like, I remember the good more than I remember the bad from it when it comes down to it. And even some of the bad, like, seems like it was fun. You know, some of the trouble you got into back then, where you realize like, oh, that didn't have any real consequences. Like Saturday school didn't really matter that much. Whatever, you know.
It's so true though, what you say about, like, you know, if you had good friends at school, and there's no reason why they shouldn't still be your friends. It's like when people say to me like, oh, there's a school reunion, I'm like, well, I'm kind of still cool with all my friends that I want to be friends with. I'm not bothered about the others. There's a reason I've not seen them for 30 years. You know, I don't need to go and see them now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and you know, Facebook and stuff like that has extended that in a way that's odd. Or even some of the people that I wasn't friends with, that I knew peripherally, that I've ended up like following on certain social media, like sometimes I'll have this question of like, Jesus Christ, is like, do I just follow them for the rest of my life and just like know day by day what they're doing from their
Yeah.
up forever? Like that's not natural feeling, you know, in a lot of ways. Like some relationships are meant to die and disappear from your life, and that's it. That's okay, you know. But the ones that do maintain in a natural way, I think are so valuable, and that you do realize, like the cliche of like, you don't make friends like that ever again, you know, is that's just from a certain period of time in your life, and it's irreplicable.
Was you a creative kid?
I was a creative kid. Yeah. I was very much lost in my own imagination of like making up stories in my head. And I loved playing with toys. Like I loved playing with action figures, but I would never play the I would never play the roles with the action figures of what you were supposed to play with them. You know, if it was like G.I. Joes, I didn't play war. Like I enacted really intricate, complicated storylines, like romances and stuff like that, you know? And I had like, you know, I had my friends that were really into that too. And we would, for like most of grade school, I lived overseas, and I lived in Italy, in southern Italy. And I actually, my best friend was a British kid named Richard Bevins. And me and Richard, there were orchards behind our house, and we would like just live in our own fantasy world of like goblins and ghouls and witches and warlocks, and run through these orchards where it'd be like, you know, a field of peach trees separated by these long rows of bamboo, and the bamboo in the center was like hollowed out where you could build forts, and there'd be like old houses that were like bombed out from World War II and foxholes that you could just run around and play in, or this well where it was like a long well that went into the ground and then stairs that went down into it, and it was like the scariest thing ever, you know. And us, like it was like my family, a lot of British families, and then the Italian families, and we would just all the kids would just play and have these epic adventures in our neighborhood.
So cool. Did you know what you wanted to be at school?
I started playing guitar in the 3rd grade. When I was 8 years old, I saved up money mowing lawns and ordered a guitar from a Sears catalog. And I always wanted to be in a band, to the point where like, you know, I got that guitar, and my parents got me lessons, but the lessons, like the teacher wasn't teaching me rock music, you know, they weren't teaching me stuff I wanted to know. So it wasn't really sticking at the time. But like, I knew that even without that, like I would write songs, and then I would like make up band names and write them on the back of my jean jacket in marker and tell kids at school, like, yeah, that's my band name, you know?
Come on,
and,
tell me some. Can you remember any?
Well, the early ones were the Black Shadows, the Leather Dice, stuff like that, you know, like embarrassing stuff.
They all sound like gangs from the Warriors. I'm loving it.
Right, you know, it's funny because like at the time I thought it was really cool, and then I went through a long period of time where I was like, oh, that's embarrassing, and now I look back where I'm like, wait, that was really cool. The Black Shadows, that was a kind of cool band name.
A great name.
But then, you know, like eventually learned how to play, you know, kind of, but learned more to write songs properly and stuff like that. But I like, that's always just what I wanted to do, you know, like I always wanted to make music.
Okay. Track 4. What was the first song you remember buying from a record store?
Well, the first album I bought from a record store was Def Leppard's Hysteria.
Nice.
I bought it on cassette. And, you know, I think the biggest single off of that album was probably Pour Some Sugar on Me. And if you listen to, you know, the Against Me catalog and some of the big choruses we have, I think that, you know, for better or worse, those big choruses are directly attributable to the chorus approach of Pour Some Sugar on Me by Def Leppard.
It's a monster chorus though, right?
Totally. It's all about breaking it down to the kick snare moments of like, you know, like that never goes out of style. It always works, you know?
And so as somebody that, you know, got into punk at a young age, I mean, I'd also like to know how punk impacted on you, you know, as a young kid. Yeah, I'll ask that first. Yeah, how did punk impact on you?
Well, it blew everything away. Like it was such a like nothing else felt as dangerous, nothing else felt as real, nothing else felt as immediate, and it had such a like creeping presence into my life of ways that I didn't understand. Whether that was like, first like my first memory of punk was really seeing the Sex Pistols, just the band name, spray painted on a wall, and being like, oh my God, like the Sex Pistols, like for a really young kid, seeing the word sex spray painted on a wall I didn't realize what they meant even by Sex Pistols.
Yeah,
I just saw the word sex and I was like, that's dangerous feeling, and I started wearing the Sid chain with the lock
yeah,
in the third grade because Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses wore it.
yeah.
And I, remember going to school and the school principal telling me I had to take it off and me being like, well, it's locked to my neck. I can't do anything. And them having to bring bolt cutters and cut it off of my neck, and
Really?
and then discovering like that, oh, Duff didn't invent that. Like that was a Sid thing, But when I really fell into it, it was like, it was the nihilism and the self-destructiveness of it that I identified with it. And I think that was really like living in a place where I didn't see an escape from. At that point, I had moved to South Florida, and South Florida was the worst. It was so unfriendly to kids and to youth. And it's at the bottom of Florida, so there's only one way to go but north. So the rest of the world seems so far away, and I didn't expect to live, but beyond like my early 20s, if even, so there was just this like the sentiment of no future really resonated with me. And that's what I kind of latched onto. And then from there, you expand and you get into other punk bands. And even if that was as simple as like with, it's really natural of like you discover the Sex Pistols and then the Clash is kind of like the next step, and the Clash definitely, their politics are more refined and open your world view even more, where you're like, wait, white man in Hammersmith Palais, what does that mean? Like it challenged your thinking, especially to me, just like a white kid in South Florida, of like, what are they talking about? And then really like discovering a band like Crass, where it opens up the world of anarchist politics. And there was things that, in my life coincided with that, like incidents of like getting beat up by cops, getting arrested, that made me want to fight back. And it's when punk started offering the tools to fight back, whether that was simple things like make a zine and connect yourself with people, become pen pals with people outside of the world, feeling like, okay, well, there's these corporate conglomerates that control music now, of like, whether that's like big magazines or MTV, and feeling like, well, that's so far out of reach. I'll never be able to be on MTV. I'll never be able to get into that world. And then punk coming in and being like, you can do it. Just do it yourself, like make your own rules. Like, and that's world shifting to a young kid. And it was true. And you were able to demonstrate to yourself really easy of how that would work. You were able to make a zine, go to Kinko's, make copies, give it out to people, and form your own little scene. And it didn't have to be exactly like anyone else's idea of what it was. You could invent your own version of punk, and it was just as valid and real. I mean, that was just like, it was life-changing, and it set my course, in the direction that brought me to where I am today.
It's that whole DIY thing, isn't it? It's like, it's so powerful, and it's so weird that you said that you was doing a zine then, and you said you've been doing a zine during lockdown. And I literally, somebody reached out to me last night that listens to this podcast, just saying, I heard you interview, blah, blah, blah. They're in my new fanzine. Can I send you my fanzine? And it's like, I used to write a fanzine when I was younger. And I just think these things, to have something in a time where everything's so quick, fast, disposable on screens, just to have something that's personal and tangible again, that you can hold, that's amazing.
100%. And it really like, I in a lot of ways, I regret getting out of it, for a number of reasons. Like I did a zine all through my teens, and then I stopped. And a lot of that, of course, had to do with like, well, being in a band and touring so much, and isn't the time, like I still would read zines and stuff. But like so many of those elements of like the punk scene creating its own network that were actual like tools of resistance in a real way that could never be understood by oppressors, that now those networks have kind of dissolved and aren't as strong, and that things have shifted to a more online community, that you're so much more in danger of that being controlled or taken away from you. Of like, if all your connections are built through Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and for some reason the government were to be like, you can't do that anymore, you know, like it's all gone.
Yeah.
Whereas even if, you know, with making a zine and communicating through the post, even if the post were to shut down, those physical zines still exist, you know, and like a zine was such a resource and database of like, here's addresses for other people who make zines. Here are the reviews of their zines. Here's the way you can contact them, you know, like, and just because a zine was a year or two old, you could discover it at another punk house. And it was still like, oh, wow, that's a, you know, like it was still a physical thing that you could go to. Whereas like, you know, like you do a live stream and the second it's over, it's gone. It's digital ash. It might as well have never existed. You know, that there's such limited lasting reverberation from it that it's not as worth your time as like the physical is. And, you know, I have such a renewed appreciation for that. And I hope so many more other people get a renewed appreciation for it.
Absolutely. Track 5. The song that soundtracked your year's clubbing.
Well, I had a 3-way tie for this, and I'll explain the 3-way tie. Kind of was based on like levels of alcohol consumption. So,
okay.
it's like, you know, you get to the club, and a lot of the times my friends, especially in Gainesville, we'd go to the 80s night, you know, like that was the most fun club at this club called University Club. Cause like everyone knew the songs and everyone would dance most uninhibitedly. Cause I think that like you didn't really have to know how to dance to 80s songs, you know? So like you get to the club and we would always drink tequila, and you've got the shots in you and you're like really feeling good, and fucking Billy Idol's Dancing with Myself comes on, right? And you're just fucking raging. You know, like you're having a really good time, and you're like, and you need that initial push of like, all right, well, I want to dance. I'm loaded right now. I'm a little lit, but I don't know how to ask someone to dance because I'm socially awkward. So I'm dancing with myself. I'm just going out here on the dance floor and I'm fucking owning it, right? So then
you literally fist pump like Billy as you stretch that point as well.
Right? And I would do it on the dance floor. I'd have my fist pumped and my lips snarling. And then you get a little, like, you've had a little too much to drink and you're getting a little sloppy, right? And maybe also like you're getting a little sad. And then The Police's So Lonely comes on, right? And that really hits you in your emotional center, right? And like that has the like slow moments of it where at that point, like you have enough alcohol in you where you're like, no, I am a good dancer. You know, I can dance to these slow moments in the song, but it's still got the rocking parts so you can kick it up and you're like really going on the dance floor, right? And then to close out the night, my song, but the last song inevitably that I would always ask the DJ to play like end of the night was Straight to Hell by The Clash, you know? And so that's the like, you're totally wasted. There's maybe 4 people left in the club and you're just standing in the middle of the dance floor by yourself dancing to Straight to Hell by The Clash. And it's a beautiful end to the evening. And yeah, those are my 3 choices.
I mean, Laura, I don't think anybody's answered that question any better. You've broke down the entire evening. Love it. Well, for track 6, I'm going to ask you to pick a favourite song from an artist from your home county, please. Okay,
so I really thought about this one too. And, you know, again, like I grew up in a military family, so we moved around a lot. So at first I was like, well, what's my hometown, you know? So I settled on Gainesville to choose as my hometown because moved there when I was 18, band for all intensive purposes, started there, and has the best music scene. But that being said, like there's some really like amazing artists from Gainesville. And at first I was like, well, I should pick a Tom Petty song because like he's the biggest artist from Gainesville. And I mean, my first CD ever was Tom Petty, Full Moon Fever. But then I was like, Tom Petty's gotten enough credit over the years. Everyone knows who Tom Petty is. And so he has so many songs to choose from. So let's skip that. So the band I chose is a band called I Hate Myself, and the song is called Song 2, right? And it's the second song on their one-sided 12-inch EP. And it was a song on a record that I heard before I moved to Gainesville, that at the time, it was probably like 1997 or something like that. You know, Gainesville was very mysterious to me, like understanding what Gainesville was about. It was like mythological to me in many ways, because it was like there was a real scene there. You know, there was real punk labels there. There was real venues, real punk bands happening in Gainesville. And it was at the time where like emo meant a different thing, you know, and like hardcore kind of meant a different thing. And the bands that were happening there were like the emo bands of the mid to late 90s, where like, you know, they wore headbands, and they'd have like gauged ears and like, or it was like, you know, very influenced by like the kind of San Diego scene of like bangs in the front and spiky hair in the back, Vulcan looking, you know. But by I Hate Myself were like the epitome of emo core. I mean, like, listen to the band name, I Hate Myself,
Yeah.
right? This really like encapsulated the Gainesville sound in a way that like I can remember going up there the first couple times and going to house shows, and it was almost like you'd go in the room and see the bands playing, and you could see the sound coming out of them. You know, like the whole room was alive and vibrating, and the amplifiers were pushing through the people in a way that you could see them all vibrating, and you felt it differently. And they were a band that will forever define that for me. Even though they're a band, I Hate Myself in particular, that I never actually saw live, because they had kind of stopped playing before I got there. So they're like forever a myth of a band to me.
Wonderful. Laura, for your last track, it's your opportunity to turn someone onto something that they don't know. And it's a song that many may not know that you would like them to hear.
So I chose a song by Valerie June called Somebody to Love. And, you know, I'll tell you, this song was turned on to me by an acquaintance of mine who passed away. And it was turned on to me after they had passed away. In Pensacola, Florida, there was a vibrant punk scene, and like a lot of cool punk bands that Against Me connected with early on. And we used to go and play there, these amazing shows like on Hobo Beach and like house shows and VFW halls and stuff like that in this venue called Sluggos. And there was a kind of scene stalwart there, this person named Ken Stanton, who like played music himself, like a lot of busking on the street, organized shows, and was just like a real important part of the scene there. And we weren't necessarily like friends or anything like that, but I knew him, you know, like, and I knew him from shows, and he would be at our shows, and like we played together a couple times, his bands and stuff. And he passed away this past year, and it hit me, you know, like in the way so many things have been hitting me this year, of seeing things disappear and feeling such a change. And so after he disappeared, I did a random search on Spotify of his name, and he had posted a playlist that was all of his work music, just called Work Playlist. It's the only playlist he posted on his Spotify profile. And I'm assuming it's the songs that he would listen to at work. And it's the first song on the playlist. And I had never heard the song before. And it's a beautiful song. It's like a heartbreakingly beautiful song. And since hearing it, I've of course gone and, you know, invested in Valerie June's whole catalog, and she's incredibly talented. And there's so many other great songs too, and it's totally worthwhile for people to look in. But I was so thankful for that playlist to be there, to be found. And you know, I was listening to the playlist the other day when I was thinking about choices for this, and thinking like how amazing it is to have that, you know, of like this. You can hear what someone else heard still.
Yeah, wonderful. It's a beautiful record as well. And when I got your list, and I went and listened to that because I hadn't heard it before. I've then listened to the album, and at the end of the album, there's an acoustic version of it as well, which is just played on a ukulele, which is really beautiful as well. Laura, what we do to accompany this podcast is we put together our own Spotify playlist of all the songs that we've spoke about on here. So I'll throw a few of her songs on there as well, because there's some wonderful stuff on that record. Laura, hopefully we find ourselves coming out of the lockdown quarantine thing that we seems to be going on forever. What are you looking forward to, from whatever kind of normality comes from this personally, and what's happening creatively?
What do I look forward to? What I look forward to most is being in a sweaty room with people. It's like being surrounded by people, playing live music, and having stage divers jump off the stage, and people fucking a room just like full of energy. That I look forward to most. But beyond that, is like, I don't think there's ever going to be a return to normalcy. I think that it is a brave new world. And I think that with that, we really have to strive to become better versions of ourselves. And that time and time again, it's been proved to us right now that no one's coming to save us. Like, politicians don't care. Politicians are, for the most part, happy to let independent music die. They're happy to let venues disappear. They're happy to let culture disappear. And they're not coming to save us. And if you look around, when it comes to the bigger world problems of global warming and stuff like that, no one's coming to save us. It's up to us to make those changes that are necessary. And I hope that this just really translates the importance of that and the urgency of that, and that everyone takes the impetus to, on their own, make those changes that are needed and to push us into a better world. And that so much of the dead weight that we used to carry with us that didn't serve us or didn't make us better, is just kind of decluttered and left by the wayside and dropped from our lives. And that when we come out of this, we're able to move forward with greater speed and velocity and gain an even greater momentum.
Creatively, I mean, that couldn't have been answered any more beautifully, Laura. And so what's coming up creatively?
Well, I have a record coming out on October 1st. But my whole approach has kind of been I don't want this to slow me down. So there's the period of lag that happens between when you finish making a record and when it comes out. That I've kind of taken as a challenge of it's not a time to stop working. Just keep working, keep waking up in the morning and writing songs, keep writing in general, and just stay busy, life can't come to a standstill. So creatively, I just plan on keeping on pushing myself, and hopefully, eventually I'll be able to be around other people physically.
And if people want to keep up to speed on what's going on, where's the best place?
I am very active on social media. I am on Twitter. I use Twitter text messaging with the world. So I am on Twitter. I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram. But also, I don't know, send a signal flare. I'm out there.
Laura, it's been absolutely wonderful chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been really nice talking about your records.
Right on. My pleasure, Stu. Thank you.
Thanks loads, Laura.
Yeah.
There you go.